Hey there viewers, welcome back to Ray of All Trades. Working on the Endurance RV again. Specifically, the springs. It seems to be sagging on this one side. Let me get you closer so you can see what I'm talking about. You see the leaf springs? Basically they're flat. And on that side, it's in the back. See how they're flat? Causing the camper to list to one side. This side's honestly not much better. So there's the equalizer, is kicked up at an angle. There's the leaf springs. Sunlight keeps messing with the camera. But basically they're flat. So we're gonna do some upgrades. So I bought 4 3,500 pound leaf springs. This is what they should look like. All right, of course this is unloaded. But you notice that the clamp that holds the springs on this one is very stout, whereas the other one was like sheet metal. 4 of those. We've got 2 brand new equalizers, the Cree 3000s, made by Rd. So we're gonna do those as well with brass inserts in those. And then something else I bought, referred to as wet bolts. Bronze bushings. You can grease the bolts. It uses 1/2 inch versus 1/4 inch shackle brackets. What it is the brackets that we're going to be pulling off of here that have plastic and whatever are going to be replaced by these that have a coupler on them or a tube on them, and they have a grease fitting, and they're called wet bolts. So basically you grease these things. It takes a lot of the noise out. It's supposed to be a lot stronger. Again, made by Rd. Not sponsored. Just decided that it looked like it was the way to go. So we got a Rd wet bolt kit, the equalizers, and these are Libra springs, which I think they said were factory. We're going to be setting that camper up, get it nice and stable, and then I'll start tearing this stuff apart. I cut up some blocking material. I've got one jack stand obviously down right there. I've got the tripod sitting down right there. I have put up a stack of blocks underneath the frame associated with the 3-ton jack stand. A jack stand underneath that axle, one underneath that axle. A couple of bottle jacks, heavy duty bottle jacks. Another jack stand there. The rear jacks of the camper down. So I've got my new springs. I have my wet bolt kit and then a new equalizer. Here's what I learned on the other side. Number one, these bolts, this side of these bolts doesn't move. This side has splines on it, so basically you take off the nut that's on the back side. That was an 11/16, 3/4 on this side. These springs on this side were not in terrible shape, but you see this metal holder here? Basically it's a really piece of thin tin or whatever. Because it's not in place, look how the leaf springs kind of kicked off to the side like that. The new leaf springs have a really big heavy piece, and then they've also appear to be riveted on this back side. So looking forward to that. I had a really hard time finding 6 leaf springs for this. Now the Rd kit with the wet bolt kit comes with new shackles. I've got a new equalizer, all new bolts with grease fittings on the back side. That's not standard, they call them wet bolts because you can grease the bolt. And then the plastic bushings that are inside here come out. The hardest thing for me to take off, well, other than having to hammer these bolts out, was the U-bolt brackets. These things are really on. Let's get these popped off of here. This equalizer is going to shift. It's going to rotate back and forth, which lowers that, raises that. It changes the angle when this is occurring. So that's what the bottle jacks are for. The bottle jacks are to be able to raise and lower. The jack stands are so that I can reset my bottle jack whenever I need to. So those mostly just sit there. Right now it is resting on those. And I'll raise this axle, which will then tilt this way. That'll give me more room on this side over here. Looks like I need to raise up this other one of these 2 axles because both of them are just high enough. So let's raise up this side because the bottle jack's already over here. Get more room. Almost enough. And like I said, these things are really on there. At least they were on the other side.
And the way U-bolts work, once you loosen up one side, the other side gets a little bit looser by default because there's, you know, one side's pulling on the other, right? The only caution I'm going to give on this is if these U-bolts, because the U-bolts kind of have an outward pressure, if they don't pop loose, raise this nut up so that the nut is flush, so you're not hammering on something that doesn't have threads on it. You should be able to just push it down like that, but if it doesn't, and you need to hit on it, make sure that the nut is on there so that when you go to take it off, the nut would fix any threads. There's the other one, and then let's take off the bolt. Now all I'm going to do is lower this jack stand a little bit so that when I lower this jack down, I can get the jack out. I'm going to raise up this other side, and that'll give me more room up here. Alright, now I'm just going to remove 11/16 the nuts on the back side. So I need to break them loose first. If you're changing the entire setup like this, that's the only 3 bolts I have to take out. I have to take out that one, this one back here. And then the whole thing will come out as one big piece once I knock out those 3 bolts. If you're changing just one leaf spring, obviously this bolt and then the other bolt, just, you know, what both sides of the leaf spring will be all you're taking out. But I'm changing the entire thing, so instead of fighting with all these bolts, trying to hammer them out, I'm going to work on just those 3. And since I'm not reusing those bolts, I'm going to just wail away on them until I get them out of there. And try not to be underneath it in case something tries to come loose. But both axles right now are supported, the whole frame's supported. So realistically, when I pull a leaf spring loose, because the leaf spring's not attached to the axle anymore because of the U-bolts, I pulled those out. So realistically, all I've got weight-wise is both leaf springs and the carrying spot. Now, truthfully, there's still some upwards pressure because the way my jack stands are probably set. So there'll be some resistance, but I'm anticipating once I get one of them out, the rest of it should tilt enough to allow me to get it out of there. Grab my little punch. You can kind of see the, well, I don't know if you can, but the bolt is tilting down right now because the leaf spring is pushing up some, right? So once I get this thing out of here, make sure my frame's supported. Once I get this out of here, it's probably, the leaf spring's probably going to tension-wise go up. The way you could defeat that is lift up that other side a little bit. But I think it's actually going to come out. Still got quite a bit of tension on that side. Let me lift up this side a little bit. Basically, when it popped out, this shot up. Just have to read the bolt, see which direction it's going. I should have been trying to lower this side down. Raising that side would not have helped because then I would have been putting more pressure on that bolt. Maybe lower this axle down on this side just a little bit. And then when I lower this right here should pivot. Alright, by doing that I should have taken some of the pressure off of this back bolt right here. Once those two are loose, then I'll try to hammer out this center one. These springs are released on both sides. See, I can move these right now. So I just got to get this center bolt out. Since it's all supported, this isn't a whole lot of weight right here, and I need to get in a good position. I'm going to lay down close to it. Just always be careful that whenever that bolt comes out, this is going to drop. Leaf springs have a bolt that come down that only, it's a nub on the bottom about that big, so you got to lift up out of there. Let's investigate the damage real quick, shall we? Number one, I see that the shackle for the equalizer, shackle, whatever this is called, pivot point maybe, is oblong shaped. It does have a bushing inside there that's made out of plastic, and it's in terrible condition. One of the bolts wasn't even in all the way. These shackles are extremely thin. The leaf spring is twisted. The problem with the other side was that the leaf spring had bent. It didn't break, but it had bent. So let's see what the new one looks like. You can see the new one has a little bit more bend to it, not by much. But when I was doing the other side and I put the tires back on, I noticed that I didn't have to fish the tires out. The camper sat above the tires. And then the bolts that came out. So this one came out fairly easy, but you can tell it, well, I don't know if you can tell, but it's got a bend to it. It's also got some wear right there. It wasn't happy, and it wasn't great components. This is a 2020 camper, so 4 years of usage. I bought it used, so I don't know how much usage it got, but those leaf springs weren't happy. Let's put it that way. First, let's put on this Rd Equalizer rubber bumper right here in the middle. And if you're going to notice that the ones I just took off had all kinds of plastic bushings, and even the new leaf springs that I'm getting ready to put on have plastic bushings inside them. This wet bolt kit replaces the rubber bushings with these brass, I think it's brass, replaces those with these. And then of course every bolt inside the kit, first off, comes with one of those new bushings, but the bolt inside the kit is called a wet bolt. You notice it's got a grease fitting on here. The old ones did not. So they have drilled the center of the bolt. It has a grease hole right there. So when you grease it, the grease comes out of there, and the grease goes between this bushing and that bolt. So you're greasing that. So this has an opportunity to pivot on there, and it won't wear out like those plastic ones as much. Something that I was a little bit concerned, surprised, whatever you want to call it, the nuts on these things. Every nut, when you go to tighten it, first off, this side has teeth on it, so it doesn't pivot, right? So this gets hammered in place, and the teeth bite onto the bracket. But the nut only gets torqued to 40 foot-pounds. If you notice, I was using a 2-foot-long breaker bar to bust those things loose. So I was very surprised how little tension you're supposed to put on these things, and I guess it's possibly so that you're not crushing this and giving it space. I just thought that was kind of weird. So on this first one, because it's already got a bushing, right? It's already got that in there. Throw that one out of the way. Now, here's and the book says you can do it either direction. In my mind, I don't want the grease zerk catching road debris from the tires. there's a lot more that comes from the tires than it does from the center of the road. So I'm turning all of my grease zerks to the inside of the camper. That means that I have to be on the underside of the camper to grease it. Truthfully, I do that pretty regularly as far as getting underneath the camper to see what's going on anyway, but I have to be on the inside to grease it. So it's really, you can install it either direction according to the book, but I want those on the inside. Leave a comment what you would do, but I mean, like I said, in my mind, the tires are pushing a whole lot of debris up and rocks and whatever else. I'm just trying to protect that grease zerk from getting broken off, and then you got to tap it out, put a new one in, all that other stuff. So I might be overthinking it. So I'm just going to temporarily hold everything in place. When I go to set the splines into there, what I'm going to use is a smaller impact socket. So like this impact socket could fit right over there. I used just a little bit smaller one. I used a 1/2 inch, and it basically went around that grease zerk, and then I was able to hammer and drive that thing home so that you're not hammering on the grease zerk, you're not taking it out to hammer on it and then the threads are all messed up, whatever else. But I'm just going to temporarily hold these, put those in place while I mount the rest of it. But that's what I'm going to do before I torque this down. So I'm going to not rely, the 40 pounds, by the way, and I did check it, the 40 pounds does draw these teeth in. I just want to make sure that it's driven all the way home and it doesn't get snagged up on something. And the other thing I wanted to point out, these things come with plastic bushing. So the first thing I do, throw those away because I'm replacing them with these brass ones. Okay, when I go to put this together, this bushing should pop on there. See how it slips back and forth, so make sure it doesn't fall out. I'm going to be setting that nut, that little pin, inside the perch, the spring perch. There's a hole right here on the spring perch, and that bolt fits right down inside that hole. Just like that. Anyway, just pull those two loose. Okay, see how thick that bracket is, that shackle? This side already has a bushing in it, so we're going to pull one off. The other side doesn't. So let's put that in. Okay, one more. This is the hard one because now everything's going to be connected. Push out these two bushings. Bolt sitting ready. This side I should be able to line up fairly easy. Let me go get that socket. I want to hammer that in just a little bit because it's not moving easily, and it's probably because the axle's pulling back some. Tightening it up helps center it. I'm going to try to give it a couple of good whacks. Now the rest of this is just lever and fulcrum, right? Yeah, we are going to need one of these bushings. Let's go ahead and put it in there before we get too far. The other one has one. So if I wanted to put that in right now from the other side, obviously, I would have to come, this leaf spring has to come all the way down to here. Now raising this axle up will tilt this down. So lowering this axle would raise this side up some. But realistically, I've already come down this far. If I wanted to anchor this thing, you're better off doing it just from the lower them down to when it's centered to get what you need. So let's just pull this off to the side. Jack out of here. So the first thing I'm going to do is raise it up to get my jack to release so that I can lower this side down. Alright, so tension's off of that. Alright, let's lower this side down. I might have to come a little bit lower. Let's see. Still not there. There. All the bolts are in, all the nuts are in. Now it's time to torque it. This is going to take quite a while because as I'm tightening it, it's still drawing that bolt in. And 40. Did this bolt seat inside there? And the answer is right now is no, it did not. I'm gonna come back here and I'm gonna hammer on that bolt. I'm gonna put that socket on there and hammer on it. You wanna make sure that they all seat properly. This one did not. So let me get the rest of these and I'll come back to this one. Actually, none of the three on the existing shackles or brackets seated all the way, so I'm going to try to give them a little bit extra help. And once they're all seated, I got to torque those one more time. Go ahead and grease these up and then we'll get the U-bolts put on there. Alright, camera battery died just when I was greasing the last one. Anyway, that was greased as well. Right now, looking at it, this perch is sitting flat. So I'm going to go ahead and put the U-bolts on this one first, and then I'll adjust the axle on the other one to get those U-bolts in. But right now this one's sitting flat, and you just basically do it, lift up the axle or however it's resting to make it sit flat. So I'm gonna need this. It drops into that locating pin on the top. One U-bolt still in place because my brake lines were My electric brake was tied to it, so it didn't drop. You may have to squeeze on these things to get them to go in place, and you want to put them in at the exact same time. You can use a clamp to squeeze those two U-bolts together if you need to. Just set it in place. One washer, one nut on each. The idea here is that you want them all tightened down about the same amount. So whatever part of the bolt is exposed from the top of the thread, that's going to be how you determine its relative position, like how far it had to go. Because you don't want them to be tightened unbalanced. One washer. On the bolts, see right now this one is just about even, this one's slightly under, this one's pretty far under, and this one's almost even. I'm just going to be tightening them up and keep checking to make sure they're tightening up about even. So right now this perch is tight on the front side and it's loose on the back side. So all I'm going to do is raise up the axle until it sits flat, and then we will put the U-bolts on that side. Remember, my jack is still underneath that axle if something happens. Kind of tell how the other side is sitting right now. It has a lot more spring to it. Those tires used to sit below the fender skirt. It's going to be a much nicer ride. And like I said, you can put the grease fittings on this side if it makes it easier for you. My tires right now would be in the way because they're huge and there's not a lot of space here, which is why I don't have shocks on this side, because these are really far in. To me, it made more sense to put the grease fittings on the inside. Easy upgrade. Hope you guys got something out of the video. Really appreciate you hanging out. Nothing left to do on this one but to put the tires back on. I am going to leave the tires off for right now because I have another video I'm getting ready to shoot. Brakes need adjusting, and the bearings on the other side, when I took them apart, they were dry. Even though there is a grease fitting right here to grease the bearing, stay tuned to that video. I'll show you why that grease fitting is not the greatest. It only does half of it. Anyway, hope you guys got something out of the video. Catch you on the next one.